exactly is a beatitude. And we have spent time studying 2 or 3 of them. But I think as we think about the beatitudes, I love the verses that Laura Lee picked last week. But I didn't think she went far enough in Psalm 1. One of the things that connects us back to Psalm 1 when we think about what a beatitude is like the New Testament, Old Testament were written in 2 different languages. So Psalm 1, that word, sorry, are we having problems with my microphone? Long enough leash now. Yeah, I would say there's a handhold. Okay. Cool. It's working now? It's good? Okay. Okay. So Old Testament and New Testament written in 2 different languages. Old Testament in Hebrew, New Testament in Greek. And sometimes it's hard to connect the words to each other. But one of the nice things is like a lot of people spoke Greek just before the time of Jesus because Greeks like conquered the world. And then there was a translation of the Old Testament into Greek. So like we can see New Testament words, like what words they might have connected to by looking at that Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. And Psalm 1 happens to use the same word for blessed as Jesus is recorded using in the Greek, Makarios. And Psalm 1, again, I love that Laura Lee read it. I don't think she read quite far enough, though. No offense, Laura Lee, when you're reading it last week. It says this, though, in Psalm 1, 1-4. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do, that prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. And I think that this verse that really helps us understand the word blessed is verse 3, where it talks about the person that is like a tree planted by streams of water, yielding fruit. I think that that tree gives us the picture of just flourishing, of the good life is kind of how I picture this. So I think that when Jesus is giving these beatitudes, he's standing in the tradition of many wisdom teachers from back in the Old Testament, from Proverbs, from Psalms, and saying, hey, this is the key to living a life that is good, that's really good. And he's inviting the people that are listening into this flourishing life, this good life. And that's the idea of what he's doing in the Beatitudes. So we get back to, I say I have the same slide both ways, but I realized I went in the wrong direction. We get back to this. Blessed are those who mourn, right? Like flourishing. That's the good life. That doesn't feel good to me, right? Like I have spent so much time the last 2 weeks, like crying in a hospital room. Like that doesn't feel like the good life. That doesn't feel like it's flourishing. And I think that in general, we all want to avoid those bad feelings, right? Push it aside. Don't worry, be happy. Any negative emotions, sadness, anger, boredom, they're problems to fix and we have to find the solution, right? We don't want to sit with bad feelings for too long. And I think that that's probably not just true for me. It's probably true for you as well. Whatever those bad feelings might be. So this idea, this blessed are those who mourn, like Jesus, what are you thinking? Like, I don't think that word means what you think it means, buddy. We're just pressing buttons over here. I say it'll only go one direction. So stuck. Okay, so let's talk first about some things that make us mourn in general. And then we'll talk about more about what Jesus said. So when we think about the things that make us mourn, okay, cool. We can talk about I think all of them in terms of death. So death of loved ones, right? Like that's the most obvious one. I lost an uncle this summer, and there was so much to grieve like with that loss, and it had been a while since I lost someone, and I was reminded of that. You just are separated from that person that you love, that loved you. The fact that things will never be the same again, right? And like if you think about the people in your life as a puzzle, like there's just that piece that's missing, that's never there, never going to be again. And you can't fill it because there's not another piece that's just like it. We can talk about death in relationships, whether that is romantically, whether that's friendships. Things end sometimes, and like that stinks when they do. I've lost friends that I have been friends with for 15 years, and like it's hard, like when you've been friends with someone for a long time and like relied on them as they were support to you, and then all of a sudden, like they're not there anymore. We can talk about the death of the way things are. And I think that many people have gone through transitioning periods in their life where maybe it was one way before, and then after it's never quite the same. Maybe your children have moved out. Maybe you have moved on. I know that for me, like when I moved to the Philippines at one point in my life, and like that was just hard to think about what I had left behind, and how the friendships and the things, they would never be the same again. And sometimes I think that our dreams and our expectations also die. And that's something that makes us mourn because things just don't turn out the way that we thought they would. And sometimes it doesn't feel fair. Sometimes that feels like the hope that you had was placed in nothing. And all of these things are things that might make us mourn. And I think that if we look at a cause for this, Genesis 3 is a great place to look. This is right after God made the world, he made it perfect, and then all of a sudden we sin and we mess it up. So in Genesis 3, this is part of the curse that he gives to the woman and the man. He says to the woman, he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing, and pain you shall bring forth children. Your desires shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. Right? When I talked about that death in relationships, I feel like I see that there, that strife between people that wasn't there before the fall. And to Adam, he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree which I commanded you, you shall not eat it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. The thorns and thistles, like that sounds like, again, when I talked about the death, right? The death of their dreams, right? Like he works so hard, and all of a sudden, like what he expected isn't the thing coming out of the land. He expected plants, and he's getting instead thorns, and he's getting thistles. And then finally in these verses we see, by the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So that death in general, right? That for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. That was part of the curse. That was never part of how this was meant to be. And I would wager at this point, when this comes to Adam and Eve, they are now mourning the way things were, the way things could never be again, because sin had messed things up. Not just for them that day, but it irrevocably changed the world forever. And it all boils down to the fact that sin is destructive. One of the things I have to remind myself is the things we mourn, like they're not from God, right? John 10:10 says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I have come that they might have life and have it to the full, right? When things are coming and they're stealing and they're killing and they're destroying, that's not from God. He's the one who gives life. James 1, 14 through 15 describes this cycle where it says desire gives birth to sin, sin gives birth to death. But what I really found interesting as I was studying is if you look at the next verses, they often don't get connected here. So again, sin or desire gives birth to sin, sin gives birth to death. But in verse 16, it says, do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Good gifts come from God. Destruction, sin, death, not from him. The things we mourn, the things that hurt us, the things that aren't good, they're not from God. And it's not how it was supposed to be. And I think that it's important to remember that God mourns them too. Right? It's not just us. In Matthew 23, 37 through 39, Jesus is lamenting over Jerusalem. This is just before he's about to go to the cross. And he says, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stone those who are sent to it. How often would I have gathered you as children together as hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. I think we see here the compassion and the care Jesus has. He feels that hurt and that pain for the city. He feels sad because he knows the destruction that's coming to them because the rejection that they've had, and he laments that, right? He mourns over that. And I think that sometimes when we don't, this is kind of what I felt like God was talking to me about. Like, hey, when it's easier not to mourn, when it's easier to shove down your feelings and pretend everything's okay, what we really are like is like whitewashed tombs. And that's a phrase that Jesus uses. I'm taking this verse maybe a little out of context here, and I'll acknowledge that up front. But in Matthew 23, verse 27, it says, Woe to you, teachers of law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of bones of the dead and everything unclean. I think that when we are unwilling to face the things that are making us mourn, to face sadness, that death is still inside of us, right? That hurt is still inside of us. And we're pretending it's okay, but the thing about death is it contaminates things. That's why in Leviticus, like it was a problem if you had come into contact with a dead body, like you couldn't come into the presence of God. So even if we dress up this death inside of us to look like it's okay, it still contaminates things, right? Out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So if what is inside of us is pain and hurt, and we're not acknowledging it, we're not dealing with it, what do we expect to come out? Right? More hurt, more sin. So ultimately, it's something that we need to deal with. So I read half the verse so far, right? Connor's like, I only have one verse to read. This is easy. But there's another half, right? And that's why there's blessing there, right? Because blessed are those who mourn. And it says, for they shall be comforted, right? That's the hope in this. In Psalm 34:18, it says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And I think, we can say God is with all of us, but I think this is saying that God is especially close to those who are brokenhearted. The night I found out my mom had cancer, I invited my friend over who lives in Port Huron. We've been friends for a really long time. And I had a sandwich, right? Because I hadn't eaten dinner and it was 8:30 at night. And I spent all day in the hospital room. And I sat next to my friend and I leaned back into her and just fell apart and was crying. And one of the things that I realized, as I was sitting there crying, that surprised me is at one point I realized she was crying with me. And we've been friends for a long time. Okay. But this is a moment in our friendship where I realized just how deep it went, right? How much she loved me. It didn't fix anything, but it was such a great comfort to be so deeply loved by a friend. And I think that's kind of the idea and the heart behind Psalm 34:18, right? God is close in a special way to those who are brokenhearted. And if you are not showing that brokenhearted, if you're not sharing that with God, you're missing an opportunity to see him loving you in a unique way from before. Because again, this friend, we've been friends for a really, really long time. But that love looked different in that moment. And I think that we just have an opportunity, again, to be loved by God in a different way in our moments of hurt. And Jesus is so acquainted with our grief that it says he bears it. So Isaiah 53:4 through 6, the whole idea of Isaiah 53 is the idea of the suffering servant. And that's who Jesus is. But just these few verses really spoke to me. It says, surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. And one of the things that I see just in these first verses, right, is he's carrying our griefs and our sorrows for us. And let's not get mixed up about why he died on the cross. Yes, it's for sin, but also one of the things these verses have spoke to me about in the last couple of days, it's also for those griefs, those sorrows. He's saying, death it stinks. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Like this hurt, it stinks. I'm going to rescue from that too. I'm going to rescue from that pain, that hurt, that grief. And that's part of what he took on the cross. Continuing on in these verses, upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. So why does Jesus do that? It's because sin never stopped being our enemy. It's never stopped sowing destruction and pain everywhere it goes. Yet Jesus chooses to join us, right? He chooses to suffer with us. He takes our pain on. So again, the second part of that verse was, for you, or blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Let's talk about how God comforts us. And I've got 3 ways specifically that I think we see in scripture. The first one is Jesus weeps with you. This is a verse, John 11:35, that maybe you memorized in Sunday school. I felt like everyone who memorized it was a cop out because just Jesus wept, 2 words. Like that's too easy. That doesn't count. But this has become one of my favorite verses as I've gotten older. And it is in this scene that Jesus is going to go raise his friend Lazarus from the dead. His buddy has died. He meets the sisters before he gets to the grave. And like Jesus knows full well what he's going to do, right? Like he knows he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead. He knows that it shouldn't be a problem anymore. And yet he takes the time to cry before he heals. And I think that part of that is because the pain that he sees in these sisters, Martha and Mary, he doesn't want to see our pain, right? He weeps with them, right? He carries it with them. What friendship from Jesus? What comfort from Jesus? The second way that I think God comforts us is for us to remember that Jesus makes good come out of bad. And that's what he's going to keep doing. And I think ultimately when we look at that idea of making good come out of bad, the cross is the ultimate story of that, right? So the cross is Jesus died publicly, executed. Like that's not good. But then all of a sudden, like we all get to have a relationship with God. And that is the ultimate good. But Romans 8:28-32 says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son. So one of the ways is maybe he makes us a little more like Jesus, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. What then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all good things? Right? So sometimes the way God is working things out for our good is to conform us to the image of Jesus, to shape our character. And I think that these verses too, they describe that process for which he saved us. And if we could trust him with that, for making us the enemy of God to his friend, then everything else is kind of small in comparison. And again, like we're not minimizing hurt and pain right now. But like that's the ultimate thing God did for us. So won't he take care of all other things as well, right? If he graciously gave us his son. Finally, the way that God comforts us, I think, is he promises to make all things new. And like that's a promise that I know that I found myself holding on to a lot within the last 5 years. Revelation 21:3-5 says, and I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. And he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. This promise is the greatest comfort that I know. That someday death, tears, illness, all of that, no more. Right? And because I trust that Jesus has done what he said he had done, that he will do what he says he will do, right? The Bible is the thing that gives me faith in that story. So I look forward anxiously to that day when all things will be made new. But I would say a sermon's no good if I don't give you things to do. Because whenever you hear scripture, like it is, you should respond, right? Like God is calling you to act, not just to learn new things, but to be a little bit more like him after. So here are the things that I think that we can take away that we can do. The first one is mourn, to actually acknowledge that things bring you hurt. This is one that I can be particularly bad at. But my permission to myself right now is to just like allow myself to be sad. The thing is, like when you don't, like when you just pretend it's okay, again, like that comfort, like how are you supposed to get comforted on something that you'll never acknowledge in the first place, right? Like I wouldn't have had that moment with my friend had I not acknowledged like, hey buddy, like I'm hurting, like I need you right now. We also should look to Jesus for that comfort, right? There's a lot of things that could comfort us in these times of hurt and pain. But just to realize that Jesus is the ultimate place of satisfaction, right? Like he's the only one who's going to promise to make all things new. And then finally, to extend that comfort to the world around you. So as my mom's been healing up, like I have been through similar surgery to like what she's done. So I also had part of my intestines removed a couple years ago. And like I know what it's like. And I would say, as I've been talking to my mom, like I'm the only one who's getting her up and moving right now because like she trusts what I have to say because she knows I've been through similar things. So when I'm like, Mom, like you have to walk, like that's the only way that they're gonna let you out of the hospital. She's like, it's so hard. I said, I know it's so hard, Mom. Like, remember, like we were in swap positions like 4 or 5 years ago. Like I get that. And I have this credibility from what I've been through. And likewise, God is looking to use the hard things you've been through to give you a credible witness and to extend that comfort to the world around you. Because then they'll say, yeah, they do know what they're talking about. One last verse that describes that last one is 2 Corinthians 1:3-4. So it says, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us all in our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. So, blessed are those who mourn. Why are they the flourishing ones? Well, I think it's because they're drawn into finding their only hope in the work of God, what he has done, what he is doing, what he promises to do. I think that the reason the people who mourned are the blessed ones is because it's what drives us to our comforter. So, discussion questions. I got 2 of them, or you can always talk about whatever you would like. So, first one, do you think you are good at mourning? Why or why not? And then the second one, in what ways have you experienced the nearness of God in your mourning? Okay, so 2 questions. I think they'll stay up here even during your discussion time, right? Maybe. Yeah, okay, cool. So, talk.